information shared on Girl Pray On It is for educational and informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Although I am a licensed mental health counselor, I'm not your therapist. Unless, of course, you're one of my clients. In that case, I am your therapist, and I'll see you in our next session. Listening to this podcast does not create a therapeutic relationship between us. If you are experiencing emotional distress or a mental health crisis, please seek support from a licensed mental health provider in your area or contact a crisis line. Always pray on it, and also reach out when you need help.
But not to us.
All right. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam. How are you, Jake? You owe me a soda.
I owe you a soda? Oh, Lord.
Mhm.
Okay. I'm doing okay, alhamdulillah.
Good, alhamdulillah.
How are you doing?
Good.
Okay, great.
I'm Rebecca.
And I'm Aisha. And this is another episode of Girl Pray on It. So, we are going to talk about something similar to what we've talked about before, right? Yeah. Today we're going to talk about white supremacy and Arab supremacy.
Right.
And I think it might be a good idea for us to kind of define what those are for our viewers, what I mean when I say Arab supremacy.
Okay.
I think we all know what white supremacy is, but Arab supremacy, specifically as it relates to the Muslim community, is the Arabization of all practices within Islam, and like the idea that to be Arab is the goal of Islam, right? And it's and being Arab gives you like ownership over the religion, because there is an emphasis in learning Arabic, right? And I think for a lot of people specifically, that translates to being Arab, right? And that's not the case within Islam. There's nothing wrong with having your own cultural practices, right? As long as they don't conflict with Islam and its rules and regulations, right? There's nothing wrong with speaking other languages and celebrating your culture and loving your culture and your ethnicity, your race, whatever. But I do believe that there is definitely an emphasis on Arab culture, like what we wear, right? The language that we speak. And it mirrors white supremacy and the ways in which white supremacy is so insidious in our society that sometimes we can't even differentiate what is white supremacy and what is just cultural programming, right? Because it's so deep-seated, especially within the West. White supremacy is embedded in everything that we do and say, right? And all facets of the structures of the U.S. White supremacy. Do you want to take a stab at defining that?
Yeah. Well, I think it's just the idea that white people are superior to other races, and it's not even always intentional. What I mean by that is like we're not always consciously thinking that. In fact, I think most of us aren't. But it's, as you had mentioned, so beneath the surface, and it is so ingrained in the fabric of our society that all of us are deeply influenced by it. So this idea that the closer you are to whiteness, the better you are, the more privilege that you have, the better that people treat you. And we don't always see it or recognize it immediately, but it operates very much like in the back of our minds. Would you say that that's accurate?
Yeah, I would agree. And I would also add, like, white supremacy is deeply colonialist, right? It relies heavily on colonization, and it also relies heavily on the internalizing of that ideology, right? And getting others to believe in it as being natural, right? And being the way that the natural world works. We're going to talk about some of the ways we see white supremacy show up in our community, specifically in the Muslim community. I think one of the ways that we kind of see that very, like, obviously is through colorism, right? And this idea, like, we see it through a number of different cultures, right? this idea that you don't want to get too dark. You don't want to marry someone who's too dark because what will your children look like, right? And this idea of like a desiring of like white features and a desire to get married to someone who is light and like that will like help your children look a certain way. And there's definitely a fetishization of like lighter features, and so much so that it impacts marriages, it impacts families, right? Do you have any experience around colorism, or have you observed anything around colorism?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, growing up white and in my community, I was not aware of it. I think it wasn't until I started, it wasn't until I came into the Muslim community that I started to see it more obviously. And it would like start off where I was really confused because people would say stuff to me like, your skin is so light, you're so pretty. It was always like you're so pretty was always connected to your skin is so fair.
Yeah.
And I was like, huh? Wait, what? Like that's not right. And you know, I'd go into my local South Asian grocery store and they were selling Fair and Lovely. They still sell it, if you can believe it. It's a skin bleach. And that's when I started to realize like, oh wow, like there's not just racism that exists. There's also like colorism within the Muslim community.
Yeah.
And within a lot of these immigrant communities in terms of like constantly trying to make themselves appear lighter and thinking that calling someone light is like a compliment, even though it's just factual.
Yeah, exactly.
So it started like that. And then as I started working with clients and hearing their experiences growing up, I started to hear from people of various different backgrounds who came from immigrant communities and the South Asian communities, the African communities. Their parents would say comments to them such as, don't go out in the sun, you might get dark. And someone even told me that their grandma would pinch their nose to make it smaller. So that's when I started to really become more aware of it. And I was like, wow, people really do this? This is like wild to me. So I think I was more aware of ways in which racism and colorism was expressed like more explicitly.
Right.
But I didn't realize that it could be so like innocuous.
Yeah, definitely. My experience with the Asian community, within the Muslim community, even the African community, et cetera, and this desire to have like less ethnic features, right? And we talked in our cosmetic and plastic surgery episode about this desire to have white features, right? But so much so that I think it's become even harder for people who have very prominent like ethnic features, like a big nose or like a humped nose or even a wide nose, very ethnic features, to be considered beautiful even within the Muslim community and less desirable. And I think that's really unfortunate because as Muslims, we shouldn't be falling victim to like beauty trends, and rather we should be basing attraction off of like what's in someone's heart, right? But I have heard a lot of women say like, I'm worried that someone's not going to like me for my nose because like it's too Pakistani or it's too Arab, it's too big. And men wanting features that are more European, right? And so that level of colonization is deeply embedded in our own community and something that we definitely need to work on. I also think that one of the ways that white supremacy shows up within our community from outside of our community is this idea of, or stereotype, or maybe it's a lack of understanding about our community, but the idea that we're all just Arabs, right? And we're all just like, they don't even know the difference between like a Sikh person and a Muslim because they all think we're wearing turbans, right? And that has to do with like the Orientalist view, right? Which is also tied to white supremacy, right? It's this kind of like hazy Middle Eastern sort of like Aladdin type of view that a lot of Westerners and non-Muslims have about the Muslim community, and there's no type of differentiation, diversity in that viewpoint.
Exactly.
And I'm wondering what experiences you've had with that.
Yeah, definitely. This goes into a little bit of sort of, like you said, the misunderstanding that many people who are not Muslim or who have never met a Muslim have derived about us, which is just the belief that like Muslims are all Arab, and because Saudi Arabia is the birthplace of Islam, that anyone who's Muslim must like be Arabic. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
They say you're Arabic, which is a language.
Yeah. Are you Arab? Are you Arab? Like, no.
Yeah, exactly. And I think maybe the average American or average person from the West may not realize how diverse the Muslim community actually is. There's literally Muslims all over the world. We have to be careful about generalizing people, obviously. But we do know, like, within the Muslim community, there is the idea that because Saudi Arabia is the birthplace of Islam, that maybe there's this false idea that Arab people are more knowledgeable about Islam than people who are non-Arab. And I think that exists both outside the Muslim community and even inside the Muslim community. Because obviously people who are from Saudi Arabia already speak Arabic and they may be able to understand the Quran, as opposed to you and I, who had to learn how to read Arabic and we still don't, really understand it very well. So I think that kind of largely contributes to this idea of people with Arab descent may be closer to Islam in some way, which of course there are Arab people who are close to Islam, but we're not any more closer to Islam just by virtue of being Arab. So that idea, I think, is prevalent. And as you had shared, that sort of idea that like adopting Arab culture somehow makes you more Muslim is also a myth. I think to myself all the time, like, really, what's the difference between wearing an abaya and wearing like a maxi dress from like America? Like, they're both just as modest.
Exactly.
If there's no shape to your body, but like still there's sort of is this idea that like Muslim women should be wearing abayas.
And and jilbabs and things that are innately Arab in their dress.
Even though modesty can be from any sort of culture. Like nowadays it's like with the internet, it's easy enough to get really modest clothing from kind of anywhere in the world. And certainly there are American companies who make very modest clothing. So I get the sense, like what you're saying, I agree with this idea that maybe there's this misconception that if something is Arab, that it's automatically more Islamic, which is not necessarily true. You know, something is Islamic if it follows the guidelines of Islam. That can be from any place in the world or any culture in the world.
100%. I remember back when I was on the MSA, right?
Okay.
And it connects. Just wait, okay? We were planning a women's only event, a sisters night, right? Where there's music and there's dancing, whether or not you think it's halal or haram. Keep it to yourself, right? We did it already. It's been done.
It's been done. It's been, not to age us, at least like 10 years.
It's been at least 10 years, right? 10 years ago. And so I was on the board of the MSA and we were having a conversation about what music would be allowed and what music would not be allowed, right? And generally, they were like, well, all the American music, all the Western music is haram, right? Because it just over-sexualizes women, and there's curse words and there's slurs and all this, that, and the fourth, right? And then they were like, but, like, we're going to have, like, the Arab music. And I was like, what? I was like, what do you mean? They're like, well, yeah, like, we're obviously going to have, like, all the Arab music playing. And, like, even the Desi music was fine, too. And I was like, okay, but what are they saying in those songs? And they were like, they're talking about love and romance and stuff like that. And I'm like, is that not also haram? Right? Like, just because they're speaking a different language does not make it an automatic halal, stamp of approval, right? And there was this idea, and I had to, like, sit and, like, discuss this. So I'm like, just because it's Arab music does not make it halal, right? Automatically. And I think that that's the case for, like, a lot of things.
So true.
Like, within the Muslim community. There was a conversation on TikTok. It was easily disproven. But this guy said, oh, being Arab is sunnah.
What?
Yeah. And obviously people were like, that's not how that works, right?
No.
Like, doing sunnah things is about bringing yourself closer to Allah, right? But he was trying to make this thing of, like, being Arab is sunnah, and, like, that's so I am, you know, like, I'm emulating the prophet. I don't know. It was really weird.
That's crazy. I mean, none of us get to pick where we're from.
Right.
None of us get to pick who we're born to. None of us get to pick the color of our skin. And I think the Prophet ﷺ made it very, very, very clear that our superiority is only from the goodness that we do, and not from, you know, the status that we were born into.
Right.
So many times he's said that over and over and over again. So it's unfortunate that people, like, despite everything that he has said, will still kind of have this idea in their minds that the closer proximity you are to being Arab, that the more religious you are, the more knowledgeable you are. Because it's just not true.
Right. Even the idea of, like, naming your kids, right? I love the idea of a Muslim name. Amazing. A Muslim name is not needed in order to be Muslim, right? And do you follow, I'm sure her name is not this in real life, but it's her Instagram handle, Eslima?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So she actually married an Egyptian man, and then they had a daughter named Lily, right?
Okay.
And a lot of people were giving her slack for not naming her daughter, like, a traditional Arab Muslim name, right? And everybody's like, why did you name your daughter Lily, right? Like, but, like, I think people forget that it is the way that you raise them that makes them Muslim, right? Not just their names. And there's this idea of, like, even converts to Islam, they're like, are you going to change your name now? Right? Like, to a Muslim name. Like, is that necessary? I don't think it's necessary. Did you ever consider that?
No, I never once considered changing my name. I was like, not going to happen, because I feel like your name is your identity. That's the thing that your name, you've had that with you your entire life. So I felt like I wanted to retain my natural name as it was given to me. And I will say, like, I think I understand if your name is something that is directly against Islam. Like, if it was a, like, satanic name, or if it was, like, a, you know, pagan name, like, that's one thing. But my name is a biblical name. So I felt there was nothing controversial about my name or nothing against Islam, so I didn't change my name. But surely people did ask me if I was going to. They were encouraging me to, that, oh, you should change your name to this, or you should change your name to that. Yeah, and I was like, I don't think I'm going to change my name. My name's been with me my whole life. It's not going anywhere. I mean, we are obviously encouraged to name our children something good. Something good can be, like, you know, anything. I personally felt it was important to give my children Muslim names. But as you said, like, your name is not what makes you religious or not religious. Your name is your name. It's an identifier.
And I really want us to decolonize our minds from thinking that, like, adopting a certain culture is going to make you more religious, and when it's really not, right? It's great to be more modest, and if you want to do that through the abaya, go for it. If you feel like you want to change your name because your name no longer is representative of who you are and your identity, go for it, but you don't have to, right? And certainly trying to become Arab or Arab adjacent doesn't make you more religious, right?
Exactly. So I think the point here that you're making is everyone has a right to kind of do what they feel is right for themselves within this religion, whether that is wearing an abaya or wearing a maxi dress from Urban Modesty.
Right, yeah.
But nonetheless, what you wear and what your name is does not necessarily make you a better Muslim than anyone else.
Right.
As we're talking about white supremacy and Arab superiority, I'm curious, like, this may be an obvious question. We talked about racism before, but what is your experience with that?
With Arab superiority or white supremacy?
Both, either, whatever you feel like sharing.
Yeah. So I definitely have gotten a sense that the religion is not for me, right? Like I have been made to feel like a visitor in Islam, even though I was born into Islam, right? Alhamdulillah. And because I don't speak Arabic, that makes me lesser than, right? And I'm sure other Muslims who don't speak Arabic have felt othered as well.
Right.
And this idea that you're not a valid member of Islam until you can learn to speak Arabic. And so that idea of being a visitor in a place that's supposed to accept everyone is very harmful and very hurtful, right? And I think a lot of that comes from this idea that this is our religion, and everybody is just a visitor here. And because Arabic is the language in which, you know, the Quran was brought and revelation came, that means that our language, our culture is inherently the center of everything. And Arabic is a beautiful language, but that does not mean that, like, Arabness is the center of Islam. That's just the vehicle that Allah allowed revelation to come down. And it's come down in many other languages, right?
Yeah.
Like revelation has come to all different types of people all across the world at different times through different languages.
Right.
This was the last stop on the train, right? And it came to a people who were considered to be deplorable and needed the most help. And were considered to be the worst of the worst. And so I think it's very ironic that the people who were considered to be the most ignorant, the most deplorable, now view themselves as superior to other people. And obviously, this does not apply to everybody, right? Obviously, but this is definitely a shared sentiment among a lot of non-Arab Muslims who have felt othered by Arab Muslims. And I will also say that I have been questioned more times by Arab people as to whether or not I am a true Muslim than I have been by anybody else, right?
What does true Muslim mean?
True Muslim is someone who can recite Quran on command, knows the ins and outs, the 5 pillars of Islam. They want to do a little quiz moment or wherever you're at in public. And so they want to know that you are not you're not one of those people who are like half in, half out.
Okay. Practicing Muslim. You're not just Muslim in name.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And then in terms of white supremacy, I mean, it's everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And this idea of like whiteness has come into my life in a number of different ways. And I went to predominantly white institutions in middle school and in high school. And so a lot of my sense of self was based off of this European standard of beauty that I had to later decolonize from my mind and learn to accept my features and learn to accept my body. And that I'm nearly 6 foot, so I'm going to be bigger than the rest naturally, right? But like, you know, a lot of Black women are curvier, right? And the people that I come from are a lot heavier. And that's just a part of our ethnic features. So my sense of self was definitely baked in an institution that had a lot of white people and was based around the European standard of beauty. And I've had to decolonize my mind, and I've had to both identify myself as like, I am enough, right? And to no longer try and fit the European standard of beauty. And I have also had to look at myself as a Muslim and say, my connection to Arabness is not what makes my Islam valid, right? What makes my Islam valid is what's in my heart. So I've had to go through multiple different types of decolonization with both white supremacy and Arab superiority or Arab supremacy, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. And I'm so sorry you've had to have those experiences, and it's not fair that any of us should be subject to that. But this is generations and generations of indoctrination that all of us have had without our knowledge and without our consent.
Right, 100%. So as a white convert, what do you, like, this is kind of switching gears. How have you attempted to unpack the cultural programming of white supremacy coming into Islam and the Muslim community?
Yeah. Well, we've a little bit touched on this, but I think I will, on a previous episode, but I think I'll expand on it, just that like walking into a space where I would say most of the time, if not all the time, I'm the only white person is deeply humbling because this is how people of color feel in America on almost a day-to-day basis, right? A lot of times people of color in the workspace are the only person of color or the only Muslim in their workspace. And so coming into this religious community that is so diverse and vast, a lot of time realizing that I am the only white person, I started to be really humbled by that and realize like what that meant. But I've obviously done, as we have kind of talked about, a lot of education and understanding to unpack white supremacy and to understand the immense privilege that I have as somebody who is white. And so I think the first step has always been acknowledging my privilege and acknowledging what it means to be white in America, but also what it means to be white in the Muslim community, which is just automatically having a privilege even within the community, and how that can often feel really uncomfortable, even for me. Just comments that have been made to me in the past, as I had already mentioned, people commenting about how, light-skinned I am or how fair my skin is, and meaning it as a compliment. It can feel really uncomfortable, actually, for everyone.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I think like I've definitely seen the way that I am afforded privilege in society because of my whiteness. And I've had to reckon with that and unpack that and understand that, and then see how that sort of whiteness as well is seen or accepted or revered even in a lot of these Muslim communities. So I think like for me, the first step has always been about awareness, like having that awareness, being educated about it, having conversations about it. Like that's always been the first step. And once you have that understanding and that self-awareness, I think that like allows you to move around the world in a different way a little bit.
So one of the things that I've noticed on social media is that a lot of white reverts, they come into the community and there is way, 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 way more support for them online. But not just that, right? I think we all know why. It's because they're white, right? But not just that, they treat them as if they're like a scholar. Like, you know what I mean? One of the trends that I've noticed on social media is that when a white person reverts, they gain a large following because people are like, wow, they're like ogling them and like fetishizing them because they're a white revert. Like, wow, they came to us, right? And it's almost as if the religion gains some validity with their conversion, right? But then there's also this trend of they've been Muslim for a short while, maybe a few months, maybe a year, and then because people often trust whiteness, they kind of give them the go-ahead to start teaching other people the religion, even though they themselves are babies, right? And like I've seen this happen where there was like new reverts and people are asking them questions. What do you think of this? Do you think this is haram or halal? And it's like, these people just became Muslim.
What I think I'm getting from what you're sharing is that because of generations and centuries at this point of white supremacy, there is this feeling that whiteness is revered, whiteness is trustworthy, whiteness is inherently good.
100%.
So a lot of people within the Muslim community who have not unpacked their white supremacy are looking at white converts and feeling as though now we have some sort of validity, or now like there's some sort of goodness that people are seeing in Islam because the white people are starting to be attracted to Islam as well. And they are looking to white people who have converted as knowledgeable simply because they are white. And they've internalized this idea that white people are maybe even more intelligent, that they've created that idea in their mind that they think that white people are more intelligent, or white people are good, or white people are knowledgeable. And so that it sounds like what you're saying is that the white supremacy has even like infected like people so much that they are thinking that just because someone is white that they are like inherently smarter, or that they have somehow more knowledge about Islam.
And I don't think that's not fair to new reverts, because one, they've just learned the religion, and then two, we want to take our knowledge from very knowledgeable people who've been studying for years and years and years, and under the tutelage of people who've also been studying for decades, right? And so this idea of like, oh, let's ask the new revert if they think XYZ is haram or halal is like mind-blowing to me, because we would never allow that to happen with anybody else, right? We're always questioning, well, where did you learn this? What's the source? Where did it come from? Right? There's always questions, but and I've noticed this with white converts, there's no questions. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm going to take that at face value, right? And there's something within the Muslim community we've got to definitely change that, right? Any other questions?
No, I don't think so. Just to reiterate, if we have to, hopefully we don't have to, but just in case, none of us get to choose where we're from, who we are, who our parents are, what language we speak, what our skin color is, and there's nothing inherently good or bad about any of those things. They're just facts. And yet, we have attached labels to, to these characteristics and entity traits, good, bad, and that's from media indoctrination and all of these sort of insidious elements of supremacy and racism. And so we are in no way saying that anyone is good, anyone is bad, anything.
And I have nothing against white reverts. I just have something against asking new white reverts. Questions like that.
So that goes without saying, but what we are calling out is just this ideology of white supremacy that unfortunately all of us are victim to just by virtue of living in a world that has been colonized.
And I think that's it for the segment.
Sounds good.
All right. We are back with another listener letter.
Yes, we are.
If you have a problem, question, query, issue that you would like our opinions on, you can send an email to girlpronitpod@gmail.com. That's girlpronitpod@gmail.com, and we might just read it on the podcast. For context, I'm a 19-year-old Pakistani Muslim living in the U.S. I take a lot of pride in my cultural roots and heritage. Earlier this year, I performed Umrah and visited the Prophet ﷺ's grave in Medina. Sadly, during my visit, I was treated poorly by most Arabs. I was pushed to the back during prayer simply because of my ethnicity. They would clean up the spot where I was sitting in and let an Arab pray over there, which I thought was very insulting. It's not just that one experience. I've noticed a larger pattern, especially with many Gulf Arabs who pride themselves on being the quote-unquote original Muslims, looking down on South Asians with a clear superiority complex. It's extremely disheartening, especially when Islam teaches us that no race is superior to another. Because of all this, I've found myself slowly distancing from Arab-related causes too. For example, I used to openly speak up about Palestine and other Arab issues, but now I've stopped because I've seen so many Arabs refuse to acknowledge or stand up for South Asian issues or struggles in return. It made me feel alienated and bitter, so I've stopped supporting their causes or even care. Now, this resentment is creeping into my relationship with Islam itself. The reason why is because in Islam, a lot of us have to wear modest clothes or follow an Islamic dress code. And a lot of those times we have to wear thobes or abayas, which gets me very angry because I want to represent my culture and be a devout Muslim without having to Arabize myself or even associate myself with Arabs. I know in my heart that the faith is above race and culture, but emotionally, it's hard to separate the behavior of some Muslims from the religion. I'm genuinely seeking advice on how to heal from this and reconnect with Islam without this bitterness clouding my heart. Please help. Yeah. So I just have to say that you're not the first person to feel this way, right? And you definitely won't be the last. And I'm sorry that you had to experience that, especially in the holiest of places, right? Mm-hmm. That feeling of otherness and that feeling of a lack of belonging and that you are less than, right? And what you have experienced is something that a lot of us non-Arabs have experienced, and a sentiment that has, I think, been growing with the non-Arab Muslim community of feeling as if in order for us to fit in, we have to Arabize ourselves or adopt some of the cultural and even like dress like customs. And I want to say, please be proud of your Pakistani heritage, right? Like Islam allows for so much, and it allows for us to celebrate our heritage, to celebrate our cultures, to celebrate our ethnicities, our races, our countries, right? As long as it doesn't surpass the limits of what is acceptable. And so long as that doesn't become superiority, it's fine to have pride in where you come from and to want to wear your own cultural garb and to want to look good. And I honestly don't even think that there's Pakistani clothes that are not modest, right? Like a lot of it is very modest, right? Yeah. So I want you to continue to be proud of that, right? And to not allow, the idea of, in order to be a good Muslim, I have to Arabize myself, right? That's not true. And you should continue to be proud of your Pakistani culture as I am of my Black American culture. That should be important. And I want to encourage you to find ways in which you can be your most authentic self, your culturally authentic self, while still trying to remain firm on the path of Islam. That's really important. And if you feel yourself pulling away, I would encourage you to read the Prophet ﷺ's last sermon, right? And to look at that, because perhaps that might bring you back, right, to Islam, and to think about what about Islam do you love, right? And to focus on that, because I know for a lot of Muslims, they no longer can focus on the community, but they have to just purely focus on Allah. And if that's what you have to do in order to continue to be Muslim, I encourage you to do that. I'm kind of ranting here, but please add something.
Yeah, well, of course, I'm also feeling very empathetic and for you and understand how difficult that must be. And I'm so sorry that you experienced racism and discrimination in our holiest of cities. So that's really hard. And I understand why it may shaken or question your faith. And I think, as we've shared before, it's a reminder that Muslims are just human at the end of the day and not a representative of what our religion actually stands for, because we're fallible. We make mistakes, and people can be contradictory to themselves, and people can make mistakes. And so, as Aisha said, continue to pursue Islam and come closer to Islam, because when you do, you'll be reminded of the fact that there is no superiority when it comes to race, as you mentioned in your letter, and continue to seek out spaces where you feel like you can be your authentic self. And I think also, like we've talked about this before, but it's so important to try to seek out those diverse communities where like everyone is accepted for who they are, and lots of different people show up in lots of different attire, and everyone is celebrated for their cultural experiences. And I know that may not be possible for everyone. We're in our little bubble here in New York and in California, where there is so much diversity. It's not completely like that throughout the world, but finding those spaces where you feel like you can be your authentic self makes a huge difference. And I guess one thing to touch on as well is you starting to build resentment toward Arab people and that impacting your willingness to support social causes. I do think that's worth examining because, again, a segment of a population of people is not indicative of an entire culture of people. And there's so many beautiful, wonderful things about the Arab community and the Arab cultures. Like, it is an incredibly generous and loving and caring community. I've felt so embraced and cared for by so many Arabs in my community. And it's important to remind ourselves that bad experiences that we have don't make up the entire culture of people. And this is how, unfortunately, racism and discrimination kind of starts, is we have like a few bad experiences and then we start to label an entire group of people as being indicative of those qualities. And so I think it is important to remind you that your experience of racism is valid. And I'm so sorry that you went through that. And you are absolutely valid in sharing your feeling of what happened to you. At the same time, that doesn't mean all Arabs are racist. That doesn't mean that all Arabs have a superiority mindset. And I think it's really important that we don't make generalizations. That said, we also shouldn't base our social justice on whether or not somebody supports our causes.
Or is nice to us.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Your support of a social justice cause should not be tied to how you're treated by the people of that community that you're fighting for, right? And that's just a blanket statement, right? And so I also want to encourage you to examine that, because we're going to find people from all walks of life, right? And all different identities. And we should not allow interactions with diverse people to impact how we determine what is right and wrong and how we're going to fight for them, right? And so I think that sentiment was shared right now with everything that's going on with Gaza and with Palestine. And the same thing, that sentiment was shared with Black Lives Matter. All of our struggles are intertwined, and we should always care about anybody who is oppressed. And as Muslims, we should stand firm against oppression and injustice, because that is our role as Muslims, because we want to protect the truth and to forbid evil. And that's one of the ways that we do that.
Exactly.
And so definitely examine that. But then this person also said that they were 19, right?
Yeah.
So like, you're still young. You still have a lot of life left to live. And I also want to encourage you to get involved with the MSA and with the Pakistani Student Union or Association or whatever, so that you can feel that tie to the religion, but you can also feel that tie to your people.
I love that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It sounds like you said, this person is 19. They're still forming their identity. They're still exploring themselves and learning about themselves. And these very early experiences can kind of make or break us. And so I'm hearing that maybe you're even having a little bit of a spiritual crisis right now.
Right.
And these experiences that we have can have a huge shape on our identities and who we choose to be. So I would encourage you to do that self-exploration and to examine yourself and your beliefs and who you are. And remember that a few negative interactions that you've had with people is not indicative of a population of people. And continue to kind of draw closer to your roots, and also maybe be open and to exploring other cultures and other experiences. And I think the wonderful thing about college is that you have the opportunity to do that, to meet people that you've never met before from all different kinds of places and all different walks of life. That was what was really eye-opening to me about going to college and coming into the MSA, was just meeting people from all different parts of the world, from different parts of the country, from different cultures. And I think that's what's really special about college and grad school is it expands your mind. And I generally see that at the end of those 4 years, people tend to be more open-minded than they were when they started. Yeah, I think there's a lot more life to live.
Yeah, definitely.
There's a lot more experiences that you'll have. Don't let a couple of bad experiences color your perception of Arab people.
Yeah. Well, we can't fix white supremacy because it's so deeply insidious in our world. I can speak to the Arab Muslims who happen to be listening to this podcast and to this episode specifically. And I can say that your actions matter and that any superiority in your heart is pulling you away from Allah. So please remember the stories that you've heard today and the experiences that we've shared are meaningful and can make or break someone's desire to want to stay within the religion. I really want to encourage people to examine within yourself what aspects of white supremacy and Arab superiority are you upholding, even subconsciously, right, or consciously, and to think about what are some ways that you can actively decolonize your life. What are 3 concrete ways you can do that in your life, but then also within the Muslim community, right? And holding other people accountable as well. Because as we talked about in our racism episode, things don't change unless we change them. So we need to start to identify within ourselves where are those flaws so that we can begin to build a stronger Muslim community and a stronger ummah.
Totally. It starts with us, right?
Yeah.
Like it starts with yourself.
Right.
With being honest with yourself. And I think one thing that I learned in grad school that was really essential for me, at least, and I think for a lot of my peers, was we all have bias and we all have bias. And I think denying that we have bias is problematic. When we can acknowledge the fact that we all have biases, that is what enables us to examine them and to shed ourselves from them or free ourselves from them, or at least work toward freeing ourselves from them.
Yeah.
So I think when we are sort of denying this element and denying that we have certain biases in our mind, I think that is what continues to uphold these biases, right? It's like somebody insisting over and over again, I don't see color.
Right.
I treat all people equal.
Right.
It's just not a reality. And when you acknowledge that bias exists and that it's a reality, they say the first step is acceptance.
Right, exactly.
Then you can actually work toward healing and work toward freeing yourself of those biases. So I think the first step is sort of acknowledging within ourselves what biases that we hold, whether consciously or unconsciously. You can take unconscious bias training. You can take unconscious bias quizzes. In my class, we were all required to take like one of those unconscious bias examinations, and it shows you. And I think it came out of like Harvard, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, they have the unconscious bias test. And I took every single one of them. And fun fact, there actually was one about Arabs.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And like your unconscious bias toward Muslim sounding names. So obviously this is not to deny that Arab people have experienced tremendous amount of discrimination and racism within this country.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's important to name that because we've just spent the last hour talking about Arab superiority. And so we do recognize how much bias and discrimination there is in this country toward Arabs. And like that's 100% valid. I think we were more so talking about Arab superiority within the Muslim community.
Yeah. But both things can exist.
Both things can be true.
Yeah. There's a duality. You can both be oppressed and also be an oppressor, right? Yes, we acknowledge the oppression that many Arabs face within the West. And, right, you also have to identify and look within yourself to see if you might be upholding systems of power that skew in your favor and that make other people feel oppressed who are non-Arabs.
Yeah, absolutely.
So-
I think you hit the nail on the head, and I was just sharing about how like we all have to develop awareness about these unconscious biases. Take the exams, examine yourself, think about it, and when we do that work individually, it can help the community. Obviously, there has to continue to be community programs and community-oriented programming. As we mentioned in the racism episode, there needs to be more DEI programming initiatives at the masjids. These are like ongoing efforts that need to be happening.
Right.
But I think that like it needs to happen at the community level, obviously, what goes without saying, but it also needs to happen on an individual level, and it has to happen at a family level. Like, have conversations with your family about this. So I think nothing changes until we are willing to make a change.
Right. Exactly. Anything else to say to this listener?
No.
All right. I think that's it. And if you have a question, query, problem, issue that you want our opinion on, you can send an email to girlprayonitpod@gmail.com. And we hope to hear from you. And we hope to hear any updates as well.
For sure. Yeah.
Definitely.
That'd be like a fun thing to share too.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, we'll be back with Aisha Rants in just a second. Now is the time in the podcast where I look at the camera and I, Aisha, rant about something that is bothering me that day, that week, that month, whatever. And coming off the back of our Arab supremacy and white supremacy, this episode, talking about all that good stuff, one thing I really don't want to hear are Arabs, Desis, Asians, really anyone, saying the N-word. And specifically in the masjid.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But you would be surprised. You would be surprised, right? The amount of times I have gone into a bodega owned by the Yemenis talking N-word this, N-word that. Last time I checked, you're not a nigga. That's weird. That's really weird. That's really weird. Why are you using this language? And then what's worse is that we have people giving other people the N-word pass, and I feel like the Muslims should know better, right? So there's no reason why I should see anybody who is not Black using that language, and I don't care how many Black friends you have. I don't care how much you are like clued into the hood or to the rap game or to whatever you think gives you the validity to use the N-word, but you don't. And you might come across the wrong one, but I don't want to hear any Muslims using that slur. It's a slur, okay? Are you surprised?
I am not surprised.
Yeah.
But I feel like I don't have anything to, like, it's not my place to make any comment on it. So
Exactly.
you
right.
go, girl, you
right.
go.
Like, I don't want to see it. I don't want to hear it. And you might just come across the right one. You might. And I might be the right one. But I don't know where they got this idea. And you know what I've heard? The reasoning is like, well, we're just as oppressed. I'm sorry. When your people become enslaved for hundreds of years in a country, then we could talk about what slurs that were used against you and your people that you can use and you have the right to use, okay? Then you can come talk to me, right? But I don't want to hear it. And I hear it from so many Muslims, so many Muslims, especially like the North African Muslims, right? And they're like, well, you know, we're from Africa. You might be from the continent of Africa, but you are not Black. And you know who you are, unless you are Black, right? But like, you know who you are, right? If you're like, if you are not Black and you do not have a direct Black descendant who bore you or bore your dad or your mom, you don't have a right to be saying that. All right? That's pretty much it for my rant. I don't really want to hear it in the community. I really feel like we, like, Black Muslims should get a free, like, slap, like, in the community. I really do feel like that. I just feel like the Muslim community, we're already so fractured. Why create any more tension. Just leave it out. Don't say it. You don't need to. And it's not your word. Yeah. Anything to add?
If you are thinking to yourself, maybe I shouldn't say this.
Right.
You probably shouldn't.
Right. Exactly. And also, if you want to say the word in front of your mom, you should not be saying it. You shouldn't be saying it.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. That's my rant. I'm sorry you couldn't have too many opinions about it because it's not.
Don't need to be sorry.
All right. That's it for this episode of Girl Pray on It. And we will see you on the flippity.
Oh, God.
Flop.
Flip.
Flop.
Flip.
Flop.
Flip.
Flop.
Flip.
It's flop. We'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for tuning in to the Girl Pray on It podcast. We hope today's conversation gave you something to reflect on. Be sure to follow us on both Instagram and TikTok at Girl Pray on It Pod. And subscribe to our YouTube channel, Girl Pray on It Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you listen, so you'll always be up to date with our newest episodes. Stay connected, stay encouraged, and as always, Girl Pray on It.